Our guest today made history by becoming the first woman to serve as Attorney General in the state of Illinois. She has served the state as Attorney General for over 6 years. Our guest today is a community leader, a lawyer, and an educator. After receiving her bachelor's degree from Georgetown University, she moved to Africa at the height of the apartheid struggle, serving as a volunteer school teacher to young Zulu women, helping them overcome racism, violence, and oppression through education. Prior to being elected Attorney General, our guest today served in the Illinois Senate. She earned her law degree from Loyola University. Ladies and gentlemen, it gives me great pleasure to welcome back the Attorney General, Lisa Madigan. Lisa? Have some fun up here.
You're having 15 minutes of my time.
All right, no, you can have all the time you want. It came out for you.
Good afternoon. And let me start by saying thank you to Jay for introducing everybody in the room who I didn't have a chance to say hi to. It's a good room. It is always a pleasure to be here. It is always interesting to listen to your questions. And as I was preparing my remarks one night, this was a couple of nights ago, I'm at home and my 4-year-old daughter, Rebecca, comes up and asks me what I'm doing. And I said, well, I have to give a speech and I'm trying to, think of some ideas. And she says to me, oh, I have an idea. And I said, okay. And so I was really excited to relinquish my pen to see what she was going to come up with. So I gave her the pen and I turned over my draft, and this is what she produced. I'm going to read it to you. It says, I am Rebecca's mommy. And then she went on to write me a note. That was, I love my mommy and my daddy. You are special. And then there are a lot of hearts and then some Easter bunnies, allegedly, over there. So. And I'm pretty lucky that she gave me that idea because, not a lot has happened since the last time we were together. And I also want you to note before we leave Rebecca behind that she failed to mention the fact that I am also Lucy's mom. So you can see how that's going. Lucy just turned 1, and as I mentioned, Rebecca is now 4. And I want to acknowledge one person that I think Jay failed to mention, and that is Rebecca's favorite uncle, Andrew Madigan, who is in the room. Andrew. So government's been pretty quiet. There's really not much to say today. Actually, right, it's more like we are trapped, very well strapped in on this never-ending roller coaster ride. And I want to take a moment because everybody in this room really deserves to take a moment and to reflect on legitimate pride and joy that we have been able to experience here in the state of Illinois. And I want to acknowledge what has been the most exciting and certainly probably most historic event that has occurred in my lifetime. And that is the election of our friend, Barack Obama, as President of the United States of America. Now, knowing who all of you are sitting in this room, I bet the vast majority of you were actually in Washington for the inauguration. It was so exciting. I mean, like every moment during that campaign was just another level of excitement. Some of you I know were bundled up with me outside in Springfield when then U.S. Senator Obama announced that he was going to run for the presidency. And there was elation that day. But every, the Iowa caucuses and Super Tuesday and, the announcement of Joe Biden as vice president and election night, everything has been just truly amazing. And for me, one of the great things to see is how President Obama was able during his campaign to go around the country and to engage people in a way that I had really never seen happen, at least during my lifetime. And so people saw in him the energy and the integrity and the ideas that they wanted, and that they wanted to be a part of that campaign. And so they got involved. And for me, that was really extraordinary. I mean, I think it renewed our democracy in ways that certainly we haven't been able to renew our democracy, in the last 8-10 years. And so that has been very, very important to our country, and it is extraordinary that we as Americans can now say that we have a president that we can truly believe in, somebody who is a real person, somebody who will lead us honorably and truthfully during these very difficult times. And so we take great joy and great pride in that. And then the roller coaster took a dive, and we were back in Illinois. And I don't think, it is an understatement to say that the arrest and the impeachment and the indictment of former Governor Blagojevich has been one of the worst things that's ever happened to the state of Illinois. And certainly, again, I say this during my lifetime. All of that has provided too many twists and turns for most of us to stomach. I think the best that I can possibly say about the wide-ranging corruption that took place under former Governor Blagojevich's reign is that it gives us an opportunity, and I would argue as well an obligation, to make real changes and to see real reform here in the state of Illinois. So today I am going to focus my remarks on two issues that I believe are really of the greatest importance to the people of the state of Illinois, and they're probably the two issues that I spend most of my time working on at this point. The first is the need to reform and restore trust in government here in the state, and the second is the need to provide real help to thousands of Illinois families who are on the verge of losing their homes because of the struggling economy that we have. I've been focused on increasing government accountability and transparency for a number of years, but as you can imagine, I've run into some roadblocks these past few years. But I believe that this year is going to be very different. There is a loud and a very strong demand for reform in our state, and I am working specifically to open government to the people, to strengthen the enforcement of our ethics laws, and to make it easier to prosecute wrongdoing and to recover state funds that are lost due to fraud and abuse. I'm going to start with the work that we're doing in terms of the transparency, because I really don't believe that we can rebuild trust, instill integrity, or ensure accountability in government without giving the public greater access. I don't think that there's really any question that the former governor imposed a culture of secrecy on state government that at best enabled his abuse of power, and at worst it allowed him to break the law. My views on the former governor's conduct and on how often governments at all levels prevent real access to public information come from a long record of work that I've had to enforce our sunshine laws. So as the Attorney General, I've increased compliance with the Freedom of Information Act and the Open Meetings Act. In December of 2004, I created Illinois' first public access counselor in my office, and I staffed this division with a team of attorneys, paralegals, and an experienced journalist. What our public access division does is it works to train and to educate the public, government officials, and the media on our sunshine laws, how to use them to access information, as well as how to comply with them. Along with education, our public access division responds to complaints from the public, complaints from the press, and complaints from government officials about disputes over the disclosure of public documents, as well as whether meetings are open as they are required to be by the law. And so we work to mediate and resolve those disputes to ensure public access to government documents and open meetings. When I created the position of public access counselor, there was no place for people to go when they had concerns or they had problems with these laws other than to go to court. From the start, we have seen that the need for a public access counselor is just overwhelming. So from 2005 to 2008, the public access counselor received almost 2,000 requests for assistance in obtaining documents through the Freedom of Information Act, and over 1,500 requests for assistance to make sure that meetings are conducted in public under the Open Meetings Act. But what we have found most interesting is not necessarily the volume of requests, but it's really where they come from. So some cynical people have said, well, you know, these laws are nothing more than laws that are intended to allow the media to harass the government. And that has never been the case. These laws are obviously intended to allow people to have access to their government. And we see this reflected in the numbers. 70% of our requests over the years have come from ordinary residents of the state of Illinois, ordinary citizens who are simply trying to find out what their local government, what their state governments are doing when they want to know why. And so by acting on thousands of these complaints, one of the things that I want to talk about is how we've seen firsthand how the Blagojevich administration repeatedly refused to provide the public and the press with information that the law entitles them to. So let me give you a few examples. Some of them you may have heard of. Some of them are kind of unbelievable. So it's true, and you're allowed to participate. In 2006. You may recall that the governor's office was requested by the Better Government Association to release the federal subpoenas that they had received. Instead, what transpired was a lawsuit where the governor wasted taxpayer dollars fighting both the Office of the Attorney General, fighting me, and fighting the BGA in court. The reason he ended up fighting me is that after they'd received this request, the Public Access Counselor's Office did a review of the law and informed the governor's office that there was really no legal justification under Illinois' Freedom of Information Act not to turn over the subpoenas. As you can imagine, they really weren't very interested in our opinion and were further disinterested in our representation of them in the ultimate lawsuit. And eventually, what ended up happening at the trial court level as well as the appellate court level is that there were opinions saying, you have to turn these over. I believe it was either a few days, maybe it was a few weeks before the governor was impeached that he did eventually release those documents. But the BGA matter wasn't the only problem. It really was pervasive. So we had a problem with the state's central management agency, again, over our objection, refusing to release hiring eligibility lists. And that is despite the agency's own rule that spells out that those eligibility lists are in fact public records. I mean, it's written in black and white in the rule. They wouldn't turn those over. We've had numerous instances where state police has just steadfastly refused to turn over police reports. There was a problem with the department that oversees the governor's family care program refusing to divulge even the most basic factual information about that initiative. And those, as I said, those are just a few examples of how the former governor made secrecy and not sunshine the default position for state government. In many instances, we had situations with state agencies where they just arrogantly refused to even respond to FOIA requests. And what they would tell us, and this is a true story, what they would tell us is that they were directed from the top to deny or ignore these requests. So let's see if the roller coaster can go up a little bit here. I think with the change in leadership, with the change in the governor's office, the approach to openness and the approach to government accessibility will now be very different. But the track record of the Blagojevich administration makes a point that we must address. It's too easy for governments to evade the requirements of FOIA, and it is too difficult for the public to enforce the law in this area. For as many problems as I can stand here and document with the Blagojevich administration, the public too often encounters similar situations with local government bodies. And so while the biggest or at least the most prominent FOIA violator may be out of office, we really do need to legislate changes to our Freedom of Information Act law to make sure that it cannot be ignored. And to do this, I have been working with a group over the last few months who are dedicated open government advocates, and we are obviously working to strengthen the FOIA law here. We're really focusing on several critical problems, and overall we want to make the law easier to understand, easier to follow, and easier to enforce. Obviously, we think this will help both government as well as the public, and we think it will lead to greater transparency and greater accessibility. Let me tell you a few of the things that we are doing. Number one, I think we need to require that those individuals who have to follow FOIA and have to actually enforce the law, that they're trained. I say this because our Public Access Division, over the past few years, we've done over 200 trainings around the state, and one of the first things we do at the beginning of every training is we say to people, raise your hand. Let us know if you've ever actually read the Freedom of Information Act. And let's just try this. Now, don't lie. How many people in this room, I know one of them has, and I see the Senate President nodding his head, because no, don't laugh. He is one of the people we can thank for even having a Freedom of Information Act and making changes to it. So, okay, Senator Cullerton, President Cullerton, raise your hand. Okay, now look around. Now, are some of you lying? This is a well-educated room and a thoughtful room. Normally when we do these trainings, we don't get more than 2 people who raise their hands. And I'm not going to expose the members of the media or the organizations that they're from that we've done trainings at where they don't actually raise their hands. So it's imperative that training is required. And that is one of the things that we want to make happen through this law. Second, to ensure that the law creates a real mandate to provide public records, unfortunately, in the state of Illinois, we're in a position where we now have to actually place penalties on it for violations. And so time and time again, as I've mentioned, we have heard that government bodies do not follow the law because they have no fear of ever being penalized. So we want to change that. Third, I sincerely believe that with the history that we've seen, we need to make the public access counselor's position mandatory. So we have proposed that we codify the public access counselor so it is a permanent part of the Attorney General's office, and that the public access counselor be given the authority to resolve FOIA as well as Open Meetings Act disputes by issuing binding opinions that only the court can overturn, so the governor can't ignore the law. Since again, since these laws have been enacted, the only way for anybody to ever get the documents or to ensure that a meeting is open is for somebody to go to court. And what we have seen is that most governments rely on the fact that people are unwilling, uninterested, unable to do that. And so most people don't have the money, they don't have the time or the perseverance to take the matter to court and to enforce their rights. So that is one of the things that we think is very, very important. We think that these changes will put real teeth in our transparency laws, and it'll allow us to quickly and effectively enforce the laws. The need for effective enforcement is also the driving force behind a number of the other reform proposals that we are out there with. Several years ago, you may recall that the state put in place a system of inspectors general, and the goal was to have these inspectors respond independently and thoroughly to complaints of unethical conduct in state government. But the work of the inspectors general is virtually never disclosed, and it raises significant questions about whether the system is actually working. So I have joined with the Executive Ethics Commission to propose some important changes to the system. The first thing that we want to do is to shine a bright light on the work that the inspectors general are actually doing. We are recommending that whenever an inspector general concludes an investigation and finds that wrongdoing has occurred, the report of that investigation and the details on how the government agency responded should be released to the public. We're also recommending changes in the law to make sure that criminal wrongdoing can't escape examination by law enforcement and prosecutors. So under the proposal, the Executive Ethics Commission would have the authority to review all reports of the Inspector General investigations, and they would then be able to refer any matters to my office for investigation or enforcement. Additionally, we are proposing changes in the law to make it easier for my office to take action when taxpayer dollars are lost due to fraud or misconduct. So these are just some of our overall reform proposals. I strongly believe, as I said at the beginning of this, we are at an absolutely critical juncture in our state government, and it is one that gives us the opportunity as well as the obligation to put in place significant and meaningful reforms. So I am looking forward over the coming months to working with the Senate President, other legislators, as well as the governor to make these changes happen here in Illinois. Now we're going to change course. Last time I was here, I spent a lot of time talking with you about predatory lending, about the looming mortgage foreclosure crisis. And I accused some of you, maybe all of you, of not being interested in my presentation. And a number of you were kind enough when I was leaving to say, no, it was so interesting, we were spellbound. We do what we can. 2 years ago, the crisis had begun. Not a lot of people were focused on the mortgage foreclosure crisis. Out of the Attorney General's office, we have been doing this work literally for years. I mean, even before I was the Attorney General, there was significant work in our office to contend with what we knew was going to be an avalanche of problems when people were being put into mortgages that they didn't understand and they couldn't afford, and because of some of the toxic features such as prepayment penalties, they couldn't get out of. Unfortunately, things have gotten even worse in the last 2 years. So here in the state of Illinois, foreclosures have increased 126%. Last year, foreclosure papers were filed on almost 100,000 homes here in the state. And last year, after a very long investigation, you may have heard that I ended up suing Countrywide Financial, at the time the nation's largest mortgage lender, for predatory lending practices that they were engaging in, not just here in the state of Illinois, but throughout the country. We were consistently seeing problems with their mortgages and how they were putting people into mortgages regardless of their ability to pay. They were putting people into mortgages really based on what kind of a commission would the broker, the lender, get, and how much would they earn then when they could bundle those mortgages and sell them off onto Wall Street as investment vehicles. That should not be the reasoning to put somebody in a mortgage. When somebody puts themselves in the hands of a lender or a broker, the assumption that the borrower has long had is that they will be put into the best, most affordable product for them. But that obviously didn't happen, and it has taken a toll not just here in the state of Illinois, but it has taken a toll across this country. In October, so this past October, I entered into a groundbreaking settlement with Countrywide, and the settlement requires that Countrywide take responsibility to clean up the mess that they created. It established the nation's first, and I believe only, mandatory loan modification program for homeowners. As a result, 400,000 people across this country should be able to stay in their homes. 21,000 people here in the state of Illinois should receive relief. And then following, that's okay, somebody else can clap. Following the Countrywide settlement, I am pleased to say that there are more and more lenders that are putting in place home retention programs. And obviously you have heard about President Obama's Making Homes Affordable program that is scheduled to help as many as 9 million homeowners throughout this country stay in their homes. With these programs available, though, it is imperative that we make sure that people are aware that they exist and that they are availing themselves of the free help that is available. So the most important message I can convey, and you can help me convey to homeowners and to people who are struggling to make their mortgage payments and may be in foreclosure or facing foreclosure, is that they shouldn't be ashamed to come forward and to ask for help, because if they fail to do so, we all suffer. And obviously I hear commentary about, well, why is it that those of us who have been making our mortgage payments, why do we have to pay for people who got into loans that they shouldn't have? The reality is we have seen literally thousands upon thousands of people and coming into our office to complain about the loans they ended up in. Those people aren't the ones that overreached. They aren't the ones that were conniving to get a mortgage much larger than they could ever afford. These are good people who put themselves into the hands of brokers and lenders, asked for fixed-rate mortgages, ended up with adjustable rate mortgages, told their lender, told the broker, I only make this much per month. When they eventually review the documents, when they bring them to us, that figure's been inflated 300%. So people who said, I only make $900 a month, we're seeing it written down, they made, $3,000 a month. It's crazy, and it is unfair. So it's critical that we reach out to people, because when a home goes into foreclosure and it's foreclosed on, all the properties surrounding that home lose value. And when that happens, as you understand in this room, because you're a bright group of people, the tax base is further eroded. And so all of us who are trying to provide necessary services, education, infrastructure, police protection, fire protection, we have fewer resources to do that. So like it or not, we are all in this boat together, and we need to help in this circumstance. One of the things that we did about a year ago was to put in place a homeowners helpline. We've received well over 8,000 calls on the homeowners helpline. I don't even have to give you the number, because wait, pick up this piece of paper. Somebody at your table is required to pick up this piece of paper. It's the propaganda I have brought. It's not really propaganda, it's information. It's about the free help. So I don't need to read, well, I'll read the number anyway. It's 1-866-544-7151. When people call our helpline, and we're encouraging people to call us. We used to say, call your lender. We gave up on saying that, because unfortunately, far too many lenders, people perceive that they are not providing them with help. So we ask them to call us. And what we do is we direct them to the resources they need. Either we can work with them to modify their loan and work with their lender. We direct them to HUD-certified housing counseling agencies that are wonderful, again, free, or we direct them, and we've got some great people in the room today who provide legal aid services. Far too many people, when they go through foreclosure, are unrepresented. You should not be unrepresented in that circumstance. And so we are asking people to please call. And one of the reasons we want you to call and we want to help you save your home is that we also want to warn you. And this is what I was talking about on Monday when I was in Washington, D.C. We want to warn people about mortgage rescue fraud. What is that, you ask? For those of you who watch TV but don't have the time to really listen to TV. Let me tell you. You've definitely heard these ads. You've heard them on the radio, or you've seen them on TV. Maybe you've seen them in the newspaper. There's a whole industry that has grown up looking to, it's disgusting. What they're doing is they are going after people who are in foreclosure. And they get the information because if there's a foreclosure filing, it's filed with the court. And then, these scam artists show up, they find out who you are, where you live, and they contact you. They call you on the phone, they show up at your house, they send you letters. And if you're going to lose your home, you're desperate, right? And so people end up relying on a con artist because they're charming, and they say, we're going to help you. Here's what we're going to do. We're going to save your home from foreclosure. We're going to call your lender. We're going to get you a loan modification. We'll represent you in court. But you need to give us some money now. And people, who can't make their mortgage payment scrounge up this money. Usually it's anywhere from about $600 to $3,000 up front. They take their money, and guess what? They don't call the lender. They don't get a modification. They don't even show up in court. Instead, all they do is they take people's money. And so it is just imperative that we alert people to the fact not only that these scams are taking place, but there is free, legitimate help available. So Monday, when I was in Washington, D.C., we were talking about enforcement actions against these scam artists. So here in Illinois, we have brought 24 enforcement. We've got 24 lawsuits in the past few years against these scammers. We've sent out 70 warning letters telling companies that if they are engaged in this practice, we will sue them unless they agree to refund money to homeowners immediately. And so we are continuing to work on that, and obviously having the backing of the federal government, the FTC, the Department of Justice, Treasury Department makes an enormous difference, both in terms of letting people know that these scams are out there, letting people know about the legitimate resources that are out there, but also just scaring away these scam artists. So we're very, very happy with that coordinated approach. Unfortunately, I don't think that we are near the end of the mortgage crisis, and that is why we will have to continue to get people to come forward. Unfortunately, as I said, people are embarrassed, they're ashamed, they don't know what to do. There are a lot of people who we can help, and when I say we, I don't just mean my office, there are a lot of good people working on that. And so I am committed to continuing to do that. It is very satisfying, labor-intensive work, but I think it's one of the most important things that we can do during this crisis. I hope that 2 years from now when I'm here, instead of continuing to dwell on the mortgage foreclosure crisis, we can talk about how we got through the crisis and how things are better off. Until that time, let me again say thank you to Jay and to all of you for inviting me to be with you today, and I look forward to your thoughtful questions. Are you moderating?
No, I just want to stand next to you. Go back a long way. Class isn't over.
I told them they could leave if they had to.
Things may work out in a way that you may not want to leave. Before we go any further, Lisa, we have to introduce a legendary fellow.
We forgot.
Abner, where are you?
He's right there. And with
Abner
his wife,
Mikva. And his lovely wife, Zoe, congressman from 2 districts, but not at the same time. Okay, Lisa, here we go.
They're on the official questions sheet.
These are the official questions. Legibility makes a difference. First question, all this heavy stuff, we'll start for a little more personal one. From Samantha Nugent, the pride of Kankakee County and the British Consulate. You have kids at home. How do you balance work and children? Fair question.
I know, she's curious herself. I have a fabulous husband, and because he works from home, he takes care of our kids and allows me to run around and do what I want. I also, as I mentioned, have a fabulous group of siblings who are there when I need them, and for those of you who know my mother, Shirley Madigan, everybody's favorite Madigan. She is an awesome grandmother, and so she's kind of our front line when it comes to babysitters. And I have to say, and you may find this unbelievable, Mike Madigan, excellent grandfather.
Very good. Samantha is ready to have, her question is only going to get more complicated in another couple of days. Okay, next question, same table. Sheila Black.
Stella.
It's the writing. Stella, how can I forget? We always will have Denver at Stella. We have Denver. 5 o'clock in the morning at the airport. Unfortunately, Bauer was there. What is your favorite? What is your favorite part of the AG job, and is it better working with the new governor?
Oh, let's answer the second question first.
Well,
yes.
I don't want to give you any softball or anything.
Let me answer the second part of the question first. It's completely different. So the members of the media who are here will recall the day after Pat Quinn was sworn in, so that was a Thursday, I want to say evening, right? The next day, all the statewide constitutional officers got together and had a meeting with the governor. That was the first time since July 1st of 2003 that we had all had a meeting with the governor. It was the first time since July 1st, 2003 that I was in any meeting with the governor. So, you can't run a state when you're not talking to people, and there was a directive out of the governor's office that we learned about not long ago that was to the general counsel of the state agencies, not allowed to call the Attorney General's office, not allowed to provide us with information. We had circumstances, one of the largest judgments we ever received was in a case called Amerigroup, Medicaid HMO. They were supposed to be providing coverage to pregnant women, and they weren't. They were purposely not signing up pregnant women. And we received ultimately initially it was a $325 million judgment. In order for us to get information that we needed, we had to subpoena a state agency, and I'm their lawyer. So for you lawyers out there who think that you have difficult clients, I have no sympathy. So things are much better. Yes, thankfully.
This is from Elaine Weiss. Elaine, where are you?
She's there.
You win the penmanship award. You'll be speaking soon. This is really, look at that. Illinois CPA Society. I understand the AG's office was involved with a recent U.S. Supreme Court case. Could you tell us about it?
I can. Boy, you think I'm boring normally. We just actually, what is today, Wednesday, so it was sometime last week, we got a unanimous decision, a favorable unanimous decision out of the United States Supreme Court on a criminal matter. Actually, there's a few people in this room who will appreciate this, but it looks like maybe my professor escaped. My criminal law professor left. It's what I would refer to as a reverse Batson issue. So for the three of you who want to talk about that at the end, gather with me. But essentially, here's what happened. Judge is seating a jury, and when that takes place, there are challenges that can be brought to prospective jurors. And there are challenges for cause. So there's a legitimate reason why that person should not participate as a member of the jury. And then there are what are referred to as preemptory challenges. And so here's what happens. Tell me when you're done with the answer. The jury's being seated, and the defense exercises a preemptory challenge, challenging a woman who appears to be African American, although she has a Latino last name. And the judge is concerned because this will now be the third woman who has been challenged and therefore not seated, and takes them back, has a conversation. The judge decides, I'm not going to allow you to strike this juror. The juror ends up on the jury. The defendant is convicted of murder, and the person that the defense wanted not on the jury is the foreperson. And so the continuing issue was whether or not there was a constitutional problem with the judge allowing that juror to be part of the jury. For the three of you who are thrilled, I'm happy to talk with you after. It's important, it's good, but that's what it was.
This one's anonymous and rather brief.
I think you just wrote it.
Yes. These people aren't just sitting around here. No offense to that last one, but that's rating-wise, that's not going to go up. What is your 2010 political timetable?
That was the unanimous question, right? Did Julie Hamos submit that?
Now it's getting good.
No, there could have been many other people I gave that shout out to. I will make a decision about what I will do with my life in the next few months. Do you feel enlightened?
You give it a shot, you see what happens. All right. Leslie Corbett. Where are you, Leslie?
She's way back there.
Leslie, your penmanship could use a little work. You could talk to Elaine over here. Illinois Equal Justice Foundation. An act this is right up your alley, Elise. An act recently went into effect that discusses the uninsured. Can you tell us more about it?
Yes, I can. We worked very hard last year with the Illinois Hospital Association, members of some of the unions, to put in place caps on what the uninsured can be charged when they have, medical emergencies and go to the hospital. So typically here in the state of Illinois, and it's really no different across the rest of the country, those people who are uninsured, so arguably the people who are least able to afford paying medical bills, are charged the highest rates. Here in Illinois, it was usually about 200% above the actual cost of the service. Whereas for those of us who are lucky enough to have insurance or coverage of some sort, you have your HMO or the insurance company that has negotiated with the hospital. They've negotiated rates for you. Now it's gone into effect. It went into effect a week ago, exactly. It was last Wednesday. What it will do is it will put the uninsured basically into the same group, the same category as people who have insurance. So this law now says that if you are eligible, and the eligibility is very generous, it's 600% of federal poverty level if you are in a non-rural area. So if you are, for instance, in the city of Chicago, 300% of federal poverty level if you are in a rural area of our state. You are then eligible, and the maximum amount that the hospital can charge you is the actual cost of the service plus 35%. So that is a significant change. In addition, it puts in place a cap. So there's a cap on the total amount that the hospital can recover from you any given year, and it is 25% of your family's income. And so what this will allow is that people will be able to get necessary medical treatment, and they hopefully will not end up in financial ruin. Because for those of you who know anything about our bankruptcy laws, about 50% of people who end up in bankruptcy because of their medical bills. And so this is a way to really help people who are uninsured. We believe it's the best law in the country. There aren't even a handful of laws like this in the country. It certainly has the greatest, the most generous eligibility requirements, as well as it's the only law that actually has a cap on the total amount that can be charged. So we're very proud and happy about that, happy to be able to work with the Hospital Association.
The last question is always a softball.
It's Jeff's.
Of course. Last time I did this, all hell broke loose. Not with you, of course. Just as usual, even when he writes them out, they're 40 seconds long. Do you support Governor Quinn's proposal for an income tax increase? That's the question.
Okay. Here's my answer, and it's really reflective of what I said earlier. I think that considering the economy that people are facing across this country and here in Illinois, it is very difficult when we see people who are struggling to stay in their homes, when we see thousands of people losing their jobs, to ask the people of the state of Illinois in that circumstance to pay higher taxes when we have not demonstrated to the public that the state of Illinois is being responsible with taxpayer dollars, and that we have to show the people that we are decreasing spending, we are tightening our own belt like every family in the state has had to do. If we can demonstrate that, and there is still a need, then I still think we have to look at an income tax increase as an absolute last resort. With that, I thank all of you for being here and eating the good food prepared by the fine people at Maggiano's. Paul, did you want the last word?
When was that the case? But it's goodie time.